All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for our webinar on reducing engineering costs of global releases. My name is Sarah from Product Marketing at XTM, and I'll be moderating today's session. We have a lot of great practical content to get through in the next 30 minutes. But first, a quick housekeeping notes. So for a smooth experience, please note that all attendees, their cameras and microphones are switched off. So if you have any questions as well during the presentation, please use the question panel on the top right corner. And then don't worry if you miss anything, the session is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand. We'll also be taking a poll at the end to see if you'd like to be reached out with further information about what you heard today. All right, so now let's just set the scene before our speaker comes and starts the presentation. So as products scale globally, right, many teams find themselves paying what we call localization tax, unexpected engineering effort, delayed releases, and mounting costs that slow innovation. Today, we'll unpack where these costs really come from, and more importantly, how we eliminate them. You'll be introduced to a proven approach using RIGI to decouple engineering from localization, so engineers can focus on innovation and not ongoing localization support. To guide us through this, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Henk Boxma. Henk is the VP of Strategic Consulting at XTM and the founder of RIGI. He works closely with global software teams to eliminate friction in traditional localization workflows, cutting engineering costs and accelerating time to market. So with that, let's dive in. Over to you, Henk.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for joining this spotlight session. My name is Henk, and yes, so how to reduce these engineering costs, right? So first, we have to understand what are these costs in software localization, and I will share with you some of the root causes and the solution that we have. And at the end of my presentation, I will give a demo of the solution and also share some numbers with you. And speaking of numbers, let's start with a number, 90%. And I could ask you, okay, what does this number mean? But actually, to lift a corner of the veil, 90% is the actual efforts that can be saved on by engineers to support localization. And let me explain that to you. So when we look at the traditional localization process, it's basically like this, right? So the developers, they develop a new feature in their application, and this new feature comes with new user interface texts. So as a first step, a technical writer corrects those source texts, so to make sure that they match all the style and terminology of the company. When that is done, the translators can translate those texts into their target languages. So there can be a couple of translation rounds. And after that, you may want to let subject matter experts to have a look at the application, how the application looks like. So the developers, they build the application, the in-country reviewers, they go through it. And when they spot an issue, they make a note, they send it to the translators, and finally the translators correct the issues, right? So this is the ideal process. However, in reality, it's a bit more complicated because there will be a lot of back and forth between the development teams and the localization team. And why is that? So developers provide those user interface texts, and the user interface texts are often, short and ambiguous, so they can have multiple meanings. So when a translator needs to translate such text, they want to understand the context of that. So they basically want to have a preview. So if they don't have a preview, they're going to ask for a preview. So they would query the developers to provide that information, or, and that's maybe even worse, they're going to guess. And if they're going to guess, then this may result in QA issues that will be detected later in the process, right? So then the translators, they have translated the new strings, and then the in-country review is done. So in order to support the in-country review, the developers, they have to provide an application so they can have access to. And of course, the in-country reviewers, they need the right permissions to see all parts of the application. But then, of course, they also need to know where to navigate. So the engineers need to provide navigational instructions, right? And you can imagine that if you have a product with, continuous updates, that this can be a lot of work, and there is a lot of interaction between development organizations and the localization teams. A query, by the way, what we see at larger companies, on average takes about 45 minutes to answer, because it needs to go through all the stages within the organization. So it can on average take, as I said, 45 minutes, and depending on the size of the organization, there can be hundreds to thousands of such queries, right? So it's really substantial. So in order to resolve this, we have developed Rigi. And Rigi is a platform, and the goal is that we basically want to isolate the localization activities. We want to decouple it from engineering. How do we do that? Is that we not only let the developers provide text to the localization team, but also context. And we provide the context in the form of previews of the application. And those previews, they are kind of intelligent. They are ID-based and self-contained. And I show you an example here for one of our customers we presented with 2 months ago at TCOM in Germany. And this is basically an HTML preview of one of their diagnostic applications. And in this, it's basically a kind of, you can see it like a kind of template where we can substitute any language in there based on the IDs of the string. So it's fully ID based. So we know exactly when we have a preview, which strings are presented on that preview. So if we then go to the process, let's focus first on the product team. So the product team, they develop applications. It can be different applications. In the demo, I will show you a web application. At the end, I will also show you that we have a solution, for example, for mobile applications and embedded software too. So the developers, they store all their code, the entire code base, in a Git repository. So the Git repository contains all the code, and some of these files are resource files that actually need to be localized. So you never want to give, let's say, an external party access to your secrets, right, to your Git repository. And that's why we have developed a CLI tool. And the CLI tool basically picks up the resource files that need to be localized and sends them to Rigi. And this is done via a manifest file that the developers define. So this way, the developers basically can exchange resource files with Rigi. We also provide a special solution where the developers can capture HTML previews of their application, and I will demonstrate that. And those HTML previews, they are stored on the Rigi server. So now on the Rigi server, we have all the text and all the context of an application. And then we can basically synchronize that with the TMS system. And for example, of course, we have the XTM TMS system. What happens is that when a translator selects a string in XTM, then he will automatically see the preview of where the string is used. And when there is a change made in XTM, we immediately see it reflected in the preview as well. When it's finished, the translations are sent back to Rigi, and then a callback will trigger, for example, the Git action, so that the developers can automatically download the translations from the Rigi server and deploy it. So within XTM, we also have a product called Transifex, and this works according to the same principle. So let's show it. So when we look at a development environment, the developers basically have stored all the files in a code repository. So it could look like this. So they have source files, and they have an internationalization area where the resource files are stored. So here we have a module where the English JSON files are, and this basically contains all the text of the application. The application that we want to localize in this demo, let me see, where is it? This is the application. This is the web application we would like to localize. And usually the first thing in the web application is a screen where you need to sign in. So think of the encounter reviewers, they also need to have access to your application, right? So you sign in, and when you sign in, you come to a screen And on this screen, you have all strings that appear. If I click, for example, this button, a pop-up appears with dynamic text. So these texts can be everywhere. So what we provide within Rigi is we can basically, when the developers, when they make a change in the application, they trigger an upload. So all the resource files are then uploaded to the Rigi server. The project is updated there, and the developers, they get an environment back where they can capture previews. And this is how it looks like. So within Rigi, we now have the same, after the upload, we have the same structure as the developers have with resource files in their environment. And we can start capturing previews for those strings. So when I capture previews, it opens the sign-in screen. So I start capturing. And let's show this side by side like this. So on the left, you see basically a dashboard. In the dashboard, we see all the strings for which we do not have context yet. But you now see that with our Rigi script, the texts are recognized. And you see here, there are 5 new texts recognized. So I can capture a preview. And this will capture a complete HTML preview that contains the DOM, the CSSs, the images, everything is in there, right? And now we have 5 out of 91 strings in context, so it's 5%. So I can auto capture, which means that when I click through the application, and then every time we identify a new text, then automatically a new preview will be captured. So you can imagine that this could be done by an automated UI testing system. So if you have, for example, Selenium, you could automatically click through your application and automatically capture the up-to-date previews. So you can go everywhere in your application. I can go to the profile. So I just click a bit, right? And I can select, I can also here simulate some error messages, for example. So this way I can click through the application and capture all the previews. And basically, ideally you want 100%, but that's very difficult because there can also be strings that are really hard, error messages that are really hard to simulate. And therefore we have other ways to present context. So when I then stop capturing, we now get a preview. So let's have a look at one of them. For example, this one. It opens now my captured preview. It's fully responsive. So if I change the resizing, if I resize it, it will change. The order, the preview. So if I now select, for example, German, it would then replace all the translations here with the German translations in my environment. So let's have a look how this looks like for the developers. So for the translators. So the translators, they have XTM, and on the left you see the editor. And when I select, for example, in XTM a string, it will automatically open the preview and highlight the text. And you see here the start is here on the pop-up, right, with the start message when I clicked this icon. So I could, for example, change this into German. I could change it into, let's say, home, for example. And you see when I type here, it also changes here on the preview. I could select another string, for example, this one maybe. So now you see this, oh, that's the wrong one, this one. You see this Anmeldung and you see it, it appears here. And if I would change it in 1, 2, 3, you immediately see it changing here. It works both ways. I can also right click here and then it also selects the string in XTM. When the translator is ready, they click the finish button and now the translations are sent back to Rigi. And then a callback in Rigi will trigger the developers to download the previews, to download the target JSON files. So what we can do in Rigi as well is we can conduct an encounter review. So now the project manager, what we can do, the project manager goes to the review tab and it's in the review area. we have all the target languages selected, and I already assigned it to reviewers who are in country, right? They could be outside the company, for example, and I can select a couple of those previews. So let's pick this one, and this one, just some random previews. And I can now activate this review pack. So now all the in-country reviews receive an email to review the translations. So I see it here. I start with German. And now when I start my review, I see the actual translations here. I can toggle to English. I can also see it, for example, if I make a change here, instead of Mein Übersicht, I could change this, for example, to Übersicht, right? And they could also enter some comment, make it shorter, for example. And I now create an issue. And then for the rest, everything looks okay. I approve it, go to the next one. And now I see this one, for example, and I could also change that, and I could do Japan, for example, right? I could change it. I go to the next one, home, and I can say, well, it should be a start. So now the in-country review is basically done. So my task is done. You know, the in-country review sees some confetti. And now what we can do in XTM, the translator basically opens the task again. Wait a minute. I need to go to my projects. So I'm opening the workbench again with my viewer. And now you see here the list of issues that I created. So when I select the issue, it immediately, so this is the, as a translator, I see the issues that were reported by the in-country reviewer. And you see that when I select the issue, it automatically opens the preview. And I could, for example, copy it and then change it. And I immediately see my results. And this way I can really quickly, you know, fix all the issues that were reported, right? So no back and forth anymore. And this way we can fix all this. So this was basically the in-country review process. When the finish button is now clicked, everything will be sent back to Rigi, and the translators, the developers can download the target files. So let's go further. So we also have a solution that works for, so yeah, let's simulate. So how do we actually save now these 50% on engineering costs? So first of all, the developers, they do not need to care about localization, right? They capture those texts, those previews, and this already reduces about 90% of their efforts to support this localization process. And we heard from clients that they have about, on average, 50% fewer queries. The localization team, they do not need to care about development. They can even now include localization as part of the sprint. So one of our customers reported before they had localization outside the sprint, and now they can do it within the software sprints, and they can achieve 75% faster time to market. And what we also saw is that in one company, US-based company, there were basically 2 people full-time working on tooling for their to support localization. And then, well, you can count it up to about 300K per year, what that would cost. So basically, this explains why engineering costs, you know, regarding localization can be quite extensive. So with Rigi, I showed you capturing previews of a web-based application, but what is pretty new as well is that we now have a solution where we can capture previews of any type of application. So for example, if you have automotive software, embedded software, iOS, Android, and so on, we have a special solution for that. And I recorded a small movie. We see it here. So what we have created is here on the right side, you see a simulator that runs an iOS application. And you see that the texts, we replace them with characters that are recognizable by optical character recognition. And on the left, you see our tool. So within the tool, we can select any application that runs on the same computer, in this case, our simulator, and we can capture a preview of this tool and convert it to an HTML preview. So we recognize all the texts and we basically store it as HTML. So this way we can click through the application and capture for all the different screens, we can capture those screenshots and convert them to HTML previews. So we will capture three screenshots. And when this is done, we can upload the previews to the Rigi server, as I just showed you, right? We captured the previews for the web-based application. We can do the same now here. And then when we open them, we can actually see that we can select the text. So we now see the English preview. And when I select, for example, the German language, which will happen now, then you will see that the translations in this preview are also in German. So basically, we have a very generic solution that works for any type of application. Let me continue. Oh. And this concludes my very brief presentation. Sarah.
All right. Okay, thank you, Hank. So it's one thing to talk about end-to-end localization, but seeing it in action really drives home the level of engineering involvement being removed from the process. So I think before we wrap up, we'd love to get a quick sense of what would be most helpful for you next. You'll see shortly a very quick poll pop up on your screen. This helps us to tailor any follow-up. So if you're interested in learning more about Rigi, you can indicate that here. And if you indicate in the poll that you'd like to learn more, you can expect a follow-up email with additional resources and a deeper look at how Rigi works in practice in your organization, right? So we'll wait a bit for people to complete voting. Okay. Nice.
Are there some questions, Sarah?
Yeah, we'll tackle that next. All right. So thanks for taking a moment to let us know what you'd like to see next. I think now is a great time to tackle the Q&A. Hank, you can go ahead and address anything that you see.
Yes. So where do I see them?
Oh, okay. Sure.
It's on my second screen. So maybe yeah. Can you ask the question, Sarah? Maybe that's the best.
Sure. The first question actually pertains to the recording. Will this presentation deck be shared after the webinar? Yes, for sure. We'll be sharing that along with this recording. Another question that we have is, what translation tools does Rigi integrate with? I know you mentioned XTM Cloud and Transfix.
Yep. So we generated, so Rigi is a generic platform. So we also have add-ins for Trados, MemoQ, and Pasolo.
Okay.
Yeah, and if people are interested, you know, we can also, if they're interested in a one-on-one meeting, we can also show you how that works to make sure that it fits within your processes.
Right. Do we have any other questions? Are you all aware of where the question panel is? A reminder, it's on the top left corner. You can add your questions there. Okay, here's another one. How does Rigi work for technical writers? We talked about linguists and developers. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, for technical writers. So with technical writers, so basically three things. So first of all, the correction of the source text. So they can also correct the source text using the HTML previews. So in context, that is one. The other one is that technical writers, they often have to add user interface texts in their documentation, and they need to make sure that they match the actual uh, user interface text, right? So what we can do with Rigi is we can generate basically IDs and the translations so that in the technical documentation, the technical writers can add a reference instead of hard coding the text. So when there are last minute changes, they can update it. And then it's a feature in Rigi I did not show today, but what you can also do with those HTML previews, you can actually generate screenshots for documentation for it. So you can basically open one of those HTML previews. So we have a whole editing environment. You can select the area you're interested in. You can highlight items, blur items, add arrows, lots of things. And then with the press on the button, you can generate those screenshots in all target languages. So instead of, trying to prevent screenshots in your documentation because it's, a lot of work to create them, we provide a solution where you can actually generate them in all target languages. So I think these are the three most important things that we also provide for technical writers.
Okay, thank you for that. The other question is, how are dynamic previews more valuable or useful than screenshots?
That's a very good question. So you may have seen that when we captured the previews, we immediately saw which strings were on there, and not only the text, but we actually know the string IDs, the IDs that are in your resource files, so in your JSON files or regex. So with static screenshots, your developers basically have to manually connect them to your system, right? Which is again a lot of work for developers, which is one of the reasons those costs can be very high. But with Rigi, we can automatically index all those previews. So the developers also get a lot of information about the amount of context they provide to the localization team. And this way they can already predict the quality they will get when they provide those tasks.
Okay. Next question, does Rigi also run on Figma?
That's a very good question. Does it run on Figma? Well, this really depends on your development process, because what we see is that Figma is often used by design teams. Then the design teams hand it over to the engineering teams, and they basically create a copy of it. So they use basically the designs as an input, but they basically start developing new and they create the resource files. So in that case, you cannot, maybe you can. We did some trials that we can capture previews of Figma sites, and with the OCR it should work. And the other way is that if you have Figma, if it really produces the JSON that the developers will use one-on-one, yes, then you could use it. But I think the best is to discuss this in a one-on-one to see your actual use case and then dive more into detail, see how we can do this. It's a very hard question to answer.
Yeah. Okay, here's another hard one. Does Rigi work also for HTML, like newsletters?
No, well, we did not design Rigi for flowing text. We really designed Rigi for ID-based localization. I think if you have flowing text like HTML, then a product like XDM or Transifex would work really well.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. Is it possible to use Rigi without cloud, use it as an on-prem solution?
No, Rigi is a cloud-based solution. So we offer a public cloud, but we also offer private cloud solutions. But it does not run on premise, although the team is currently working on that. But at the moment, we don't have that.
Okay, I think we're running out of time. There's one last question, but we will follow up in the email. to address that question since we're very close to the end. So let me just wrap up this session. All right, so thank you so much for those great questions. As mentioned, we'll be sharing the webinar recording so you can revisit any part of the session and share it with your team. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We love the engagement and we're excited to keep the conversation going. So with that said, enjoy the rest of your day and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, Hank.
Thank you.
All right.